So, welcome everyone. I'm joined with Armunn and Zeal. If you want to introduce yourselves, gentlemen, just really quickly.
Hello, everyone. This is Armunn.
Hi everyone, this is Zil.
So, gentlemen, we gather today to discuss the physiognomy of our decline. We are surrounded by a culture that has reached the end of history, yet it refuses to sit still. Instead, it has turned its frantic energy inward upon the flesh itself. We see a landscape of hollowed faces within the celebrity culture, beige art and dead-eye stares, a world where the supple vitality of life is being traded for a skeletal mineralized perfection. Spengler tells us the world city eliminates the terror of death because we have already ceased to live as a type. If the mind is indeed the parasite of the soul, as Clagus states, is the Frankenstein filler of plastic surgery the final stage of this parasitic infection? Are we hollowing our cheeks and sharpening our jaws because our geist is literally crystallizing the last remains of our very life? Is the economic animal simply the name we give to a man whose soul has been entirely replaced by the state's dead concepts? This is the transition from the biocentric to the logocentric, upon the path to the final tomb of the world city where lies the Faustian destiny and a cord of poison. To set the stage, I point to the words of the philosopher Jean Baudrillard, who perhaps best understood our obsession with the surface at the expense of the soul. Quote, "We live in a world where there is more and more information and less meaning. We are all narcissists in search of a mirror, but the mirror we find is the screen, and the face we see there is already a ghost." So, I guess this is the first question, guys. So let us begin looking at the ghosts we are creating within the society, and I guess as well the morphological culture that we're beginning to sort of exhibit, right, vis-a-vis this Frankensteinian filler of plastic surgery. So why, and just anyone jump in first, why are we so desperate? Not as in general, but just the West and the global culture that we see emerging. Why are we so desperate to carve our own humanity to meet the demands of a digital void? What are your opinions upon that?
Well, I think that it's first of all, it's not new, but this is, of course, the climax of something that has been with us for a long, long time, which is this idealization of what man. And when I say man here is with capital M, of what humanity, of what a human being ideally should be. And of course, you have this in religion, you have this in politics, you have this in economy. You have this, of course, also introduced into culture. And when celebrity, the if you want to call celebrity culture or whatever you want to call it, began to have prevalence, it instituted a set of idealized, um, you know, human beings that, in a way, replaced a pantheon of gods, right? And this is not to say that the previous pantheon of gods, as ideals, were organic and correct in terms of what humanity is. But what it did is everyone that were already pointed out as being a sinner by birth were now completely, devoid of this ideal and had to work towards or try to aim towards approaching as much as they could those ideals that were presented, right? And so it caused a stress, a tension psychologically, where everyone felt that they were insufficient towards those, that pantheon that was presented. And of course, it was in every field. It's not necessarily just the looks. Of course, the gist of your question is about the looks, about the plastic surgery and so on. But it wasn't just that. It was even intellectually. How should I be intellectually to be respected, for example, right? So all these ideals that were artificial, because again, I say something that I said in a previous conversation, is that, admiration is a perfectly healthy human process, right? You admire someone that you see do something well, and you even may want to learn from that individual that you admire, and so on and so forth. But that is skewed then to a set, like I said, a pantheon of ideals that have nothing to do with organic humanity. And so the tension that was already pre-existing, because we are indoctrinated from childhood to basically convince ourselves that we are insufficient by birth, and therefore it is society that gives us any meaning, right? You are a worker in a sense. You are this economic cog, right, in this big machine, and you have to perform in accordance, otherwise you do not have any worth, and therefore are cast aside, and so on and so forth. So of course, with social media, it was the celebrity culture, but then again it increased gradually. And with social media, where basically this exposure of the private man, and again here man in capital M, became completely mainstream, and it exploded into the public sphere. Um, there's, of course, this attempt to be as acceptable as possible, to fit that mold as acceptable, and be as acceptable as possible within those presented frameworks. And so the tension, like I said, that was generated was growing generation after generation until an explosion that is very, very near. I think that the explosion of this tension will be very, very near, where I think we will see insanity in a level that perhaps we've never expected to see. And we also see it in the public sphere. I mean, even just before we started recording, we were talking about Trump's speech in Davos, right? And I mean, how insane it is, and how all our lives we never expected ever that the political sphere would throw diplomacy that they themselves built out the window. But I think that the private common man will suffer that explosion of this tension that grew from this feeling of insufficiency. And although it is, of course, nefarious, it will be nefarious. It is, again, like we've stated before in other conversations, a great opportunity for people to just, take it out of their system, in the sense of, yeah, if you had been, involved in, trying to imitate these molds, it is a golden opportunity to just, just throw it out completely into down the drain, and be as closer to yourself, rediscover yourself as much as you can. But yes, there is absolutely a psychological tension that was initiated and grew over decades to reach this point, man.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any opinions to make upon that, Zeal? I also, as well, you made some really quite interesting comments in the WhatsApp on this as well, Zeal. You had I would say quite, for me, it was a very stimulating point of view, I think.
Well, I kind of had the idea to tie the sort of plastic surgery. I mean, what is the modern term here? I don't think they call it plastic surgery anymore. Is there? I'm sure there's a more.
There is a slang term. It is called look maxing.
What do they call it?
Look maxing.
Look maxing. All right, that's more like a smart term.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a bit more trendy. But there's also, like, is there not a kind of more modern diagnostic term that the surgeons use? Like,
we have body dysmorphia. I guess that would be one.
But the
there is.
like, I mean, if you're selling the cosmetic surgery to someone, what do you sell it as? I mean, what do you advertise it as? Enhancement.
Enhancement, perhaps? Yes,
Enhancement,
perhaps.
yeah. Hmm.
Enhancement. Right. Well, how do I put it? So I kind of two spin-offs into this, right? One is in and around sort of body dysmorphia, and in that I include like the likes of anorexia nervosa and bulimia, which are eating disorders. Now, the reason I tie them in with the cosmetic surgery thing is that essentially the commonality there is body image. Like what does the person, what are they, what makes them feel good? What do they think that they should look like? And so that's kind of one element of it. So the body dysmorphia, that kind of that type of these are mental health problems, serious sort of mental health problems. So you go from cosmetic surgery into what's a DSM-IV sort of mental health issue, and then it also has a spin-off into essentially the occult and into sort of demonology, as I see it, like, because for a variety of kind of complex reasons, one of which has to do with the online sort of presence of groups, support groups who support anorexia and support anorexics, how to develop their illness and how to hide it from the people around them, and what practices they can engage in. And within that online thing, there's a hybrid manifestation of anorexia, which ties in is sort of tied in with what do we call it? This new ageism, and the hybridization between what this is actually is a justification, really, for addiction. So what you find with a lot of addicts, the justification sort of complexity and syndrome is woven into what they're doing. So what I'm trying to get at here is, in the particular article I was looking at, maybe we can refer to it later, the anorexia kind of group had kind of morphed its behavior into a sort of a worship, sort of quasi-religious, spiritual, new agey. They'd invoke this language in and around anorexia into being a sort of a lifestyle choice, and a kind of almost like a spiritual. I'll have a look at the article there in a second, but they're
Like
talking
a
about
penance
literally a
or
god. Come again, Silas?
like a penance of sort, a penance through starvation.
Yeah, they've kind of like it'd be like a drug addict saying, well, it gets me closer to God, that's why I do PCP, or that's why I take LSDs, because I can see God, and Joe Rogan told me to do it, and we've got a cult up the jungle where we all take these hallucinogenics, and it gets us close to God. And that's why we're doing it. It's got nothing to do with the actual drug. We're trying to get, so you get into this kind of terrain, and similarly, it seems with the anorexia thing, that they spin off into this kind of private, deeply private, secretive behavior, and they seek resonance with people in the online community often, and that's where they share their sort of traits and ways of doing things. Now, but the third, before we explore that, the other kind of spin-off is, as I said, kind of demonology in I suppose, in the true sense, or the creation of kind of an egregoric entity, which is, it's tied in with addiction itself, that all addiction is demonic. It has a demonic reflection, ultimately, because there's such a focus of energy, if you will, that eventually you create an entity as such. And that's where that's where back in the day where the idea of demons came from, and I think it's still relevant. So there's these, but I'd say right at the offset, like, and this is a very complex area, but right at the offset, you know, the cosmetic thing. One angle on it is standardization, and to move away from nature toward a kind of a standardized, we spoke about this a few chats ago with the Mono song, with what was the lady's name? Taylor Swift, yeah. Actually, incidentally, Taylor appears to have had cosmetic surgery recently, just as I was reading some stuff online before we had this chat. Anyway, the point being that with the cultural output, like a song, things are morphing into a mono song where every piece of music is slowly starting to sound the same. Similarly with the human face, like there's an accepted sort of a standardized facial characteristics which are desirable. And they've been largely, I think, it's the beauty of this culture which we detest and deplore, and we're highly critical of it here. But that particular sort of, postmodern globalists, extreme media sort of, corporate culture has created this, this kind of demonic entity that people are trying to emulate how it looks. They're trying to become it, if you will. They're trying to become that vacuous, sculpted figure, this hideous figure, because it represents to them the values that they define, that they understand, that are relevant, hip, cool. It makes them acceptable, makes them fit in, it makes them feel valued. It makes, it inhabits a space where they don't have self-value. It makes them feel that they're kind of with it, living life in the fast lane kind of thing. And so there's a variety of these kind of complex tangents off it. But I think there's room to think about cosmetic surgery, specifically with regard to, say, the Hollywood and or TV, celebrity culture spin-off, that whole area, that there's reason to think of it as an actual mental disorder. It is a mental disorder that should, in theory, if the people that write DSM-IV, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Abnormal Psychology, if they apply the same criteria that they develop that manual with, they should also include cosmetic surgery, because it essentially follows the same type of criteria, And in many cases, we see that it's a situation which gets worse. Like it has an abnormal and a kind of a trajectory that is, pathological. It seems to get worse with certain people, and there's no end to it. Like if you fix a wrinkle here and puff an eyebrow there, like tomorrow something else is going to be out, because Father Time is still knocking on the door, And so there's this side of it, and there's this freezing of the face as well, because in the mirror is a demon. There is a demon in the mirror, believe it or not. And in the screen is a demon. And in the camera lens is a demon as well. And this demon, how it sees, it sees things in frozen moments of time. So it sees the face as a static, like a photograph. I remember that there was a movie one time, and I think it was, it might have been Indiana Jones or some godforsaken movie, Crocodile Dundee or something like that. But there was something brought up, a superstition of some tribe, that they didn't want their photograph taken because they believed it petrified their spirit. It kind of caught their spirit in that space-time. So they had a superstition around cameras. And the demon within the camera freezes the face. It removes the face of characteristics of emotion. So part of this craving to become this image, and now we're talking about imagery and idolism, idolatry in the true sense, in the biblical sense, in the supernatural sense, in the occult sense, idolatry, is to become the idol, IDOL. It's to become the idol.
Yeah.
And that idol has a static face. And the reason it has a static face, it's devoid of emotion and it's frozen in time. And these are deep-seated subterranean currents that are moving in and around this topic and why people are doing this, that they themselves may not understand, or they may not have the full depth of the resonant understanding of what's actually happening and what they're interfering with. And when we often, us members of the public, we look back and we see some of these characters that are on our TV screens, and they become hideous. These hideous figurines, and it's an aberration. And part of it as well is tied in with this, Pablo Picasso and this postmodernist breakdown of form. That's kind of in there as well, and I'm sure drug use, there's intoxication in there as well, because the ordinary common sense seems to have been completely destroyed at this point by the time a lot of these people get into this. And also, sorry, go ahead, Silas.
No, I'm totally agreeing with you. You're on a roll, man. Please.
So, yeah, I know. I'm just throwing it out there because there's a lot of angles in it, as it were.
Another angle to this, and we will come back around. There's a few things I want to get to first, but we will come back around to this egregoric or demonological aspect, which I think probably merits comment or further exploration. But what's interesting as well, if we were to just really quickly look at the sort of surface idea of that this perhaps is a form of ritualism, some form of, if you will, cosmic or divine drama that's ongoing here. I mean, even the term cosmetic itself, it contains the word cosmos in it, and it comes from the ancient Greek kosmetikos, which means the cosmos, and techne, which is literally the skill of ordering or arranging things, or in this case with the cosmos as we use it now, which is the arrangement or the order of the universe, or the world, or the realm of existence in our case, that it is in fact the skill in ordering the universe itself, right? Because if man is an image of God, if man is the blanket which is thrown on to the mystery that forms the image of God, or the breath of God, right, the exhalation of God, then to destroy that image, at least physically or materially, and of course that itself has further reverberations, and as you're saying, creating an aberration out of not just the form, but of the formless aspects of man as well. So this cosmetic industry is itself a sort of a scalpel taken to the grand mystery of the cosmos, and to it's almost a sacrilegious sacrificing of man's and God's irreducibility, right? So it's like what you're saying as well, the demon, if you will, the evil. It wants to take a snapshot of time to freeze time. This is what we see as well with the even simulations that's created vis-a-vis AI and agentic AI. For example, the Pentagon's, I forget the name of it now, but they have a world simulation where they use to predict and war game and all of this. What that is effectively, they want total efficiency. They are in fear of time, because they understand time devours all things, including time itself. So thus, to freeze time is to fundamentally ensure that time cannot thaw them, and thaw their life away. So I think a lot of it is down to fear. But here's a question. We'll just for you, Armunn, and then we'll go back to you, Zeal, and then we'll go back to that egregoric aspect. So, I forgot to note down the where this quote is from, but it goes, quote, "The logic of the commodity has reached the heart of the individual. We no longer possess ourselves, we manage ourselves as a portfolio. So traditionally the human face was a gift, an unearned organic manifestation of both lineage and of spirit, something that is transcendental. Now, under the reign of the Homo economicus, the economic animal of man, we have turned the face into a sort of project or an asset in and of itself. You know, if we accept the paradox of valuation, which is that if you try to value something through a measurement of something physical or material, you in turn devalue it. Then by assigning a social and sexual price to every millimeter of the jaw and the cheek, the eyes, and even the forehead as well, we have fundamentally liquidated our intrinsic worth, have we not? So is the emaciated, hollowed look merely this sort of pathological desire within the economic animal towards lean efficiency? Is it to create a man who becomes like a walking balance sheet, to become itself a monument, an idol to the void economy of the plus one, minus one, establishing that balance between both the liability and the asset? What are your opinions upon that?
Well, it is in fact, I think, walking in the actual opposite direction, because it is removing the individuality from even the face, right? Because the idea, the original organic setting of it is that your face is your own and no one else has that exact face, right? So if you start standardizing how a face should be, which piggybacks a bit with what I said before in my previous statements, if you standardize, you basically work towards everyone having a similar face, which plays, of course, with the idea of the gray man, right? The gray humanity, the humanity that isn't individual, but it's all basically a homogeneous kind of group, right? It loses its individuality. So yes, it is doing that, but it's going against the individual. It's not like the individual is trying to be more individual by doing that, in the sense of, I will make my face apart from all others, in the sense, right? So to enhance my individuality. No, the thinking behind that is, I'm going to make my face as that ideal that everyone wants. And that is why, because that ideal is in demand, again, an economic term, I prefer to have that instead of the one I was born with. Right? So now, regarding the demon that Zeal was talking about, and quite pertinently, in that metaphorical kind of way, what must be also understood, in my opinion, is that the demon came out, or the demon, the jinn, if you like, came out of the lamp of each individual. And when the individual looks at the mirror and sees something else there, in the sense that the reflection that they see in the mirror is no longer themselves, they no longer see it as the one they should be, that the demon comes out of themselves through that rejection that is then projected onto that mirror, right? So it's like, oh, okay, I have two big ears, right? So in order to be accepted, I have to undergo surgery to reduce the ears, or do whatever they do in those cases, which means that I will stop being me. I do not accept this trait because I was made fun at school, or whatever it is, whatever story each individual has. But what I'm saying is that they project onto that mirror the demon that Zeal was talking about out of their own self. So they give it existence, which is, of course, a false artificial existence. The demon doesn't really organically live, you understand, but it's given animation in the psyche by this rejection of what is seen in that mirror, right? And so that is the process where the demon appears. And then, of course, in a very real way, that demon psychologically controls that person, because they will always interact with others considering that they are at fault, or, like I said in religious terms, that they are sinners, right? They are not up to the par. They are not up to the level, the standard that they should be it, again, in looks or in other fields. Am I thinking correctly according to the standard, for example, right? Is my opinion correct according to the standard, right? So there are several types of mirrors, and not just looks. Looks are even, the lowest type in that regard. There are many more subtle mirrors of this kind. So yeah, the demon comes out onto the mirror, but projected there by the individual looking, and the individual that says, "Ooh, that can't be me. I need to change that one that is there." And by doing that, you basically, make a pact to eliminate, let's say, to kill your organic self, of course, which can never be killed in a true sense, but you can pretend for the rest of your life that that organic self never even existed. And that, of course, has it can have, like Zeal was talking about, a cultish uh, lean to it, like the bulimias groups that he was talking about, bulimic and anorexic groups, sure. But there are certainly groups for all types of these, standardized rejections. And I prefer calling them standardized rejections because they are the least individual thing at all. It is, if um, it is now an act of individuality. It is nowadays an act of individuality. And I feel it myself. And I am certain, I don't know if you guys have any tattoos, for example, but I don't. And I feel as an act of sheer individuality to walk around the street, or, go to the beach or something like that. And I'm the only one without a tattoo.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
So,
yeah, no, I don't have tattoos either. I feel the same. Yeah.
right, but the thing is, you what it was introduced as, okay, you do a tattoo and you are more individual, right? You are set apart by doing that tattoo. However, it is exactly the opposite, right? Because if everyone tries to do that quote unquote enhancement, whatever in their minds would be, then of course everyone is standardized. If everyone is tattooed, then the guy that isn't is the individual, because he is organically as he should be, right? In that sense. So yeah, I think that answering your original question and also Zeal's comment, that's what I have to say for now.
I totally I think this really orbits the idea of the death of the real. And I have some questions on that because it's quite interesting, and it sort of ties in as well with the whole carbon craze with the sustainability thing, which we could dive into too. But do you have any comments to make upon Armunn's thoughts, Zeal, or just to the wider topic in general?
I suppose just to the wider topic is also kind of this reliance on science. Trust the science, trust the doctor, trust the scalpel, trust the cosmetic surgeon, and it's just another sort of a consumerist. How do you say? something. It's like another product that it's available to fix things. Like it's like medication or drugs. So there's that aspect to it too. Specifically with medicine, surgery, and that type of science being used to remedy things. So there's a whole kind of a trend there as well in that sense.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you see the same thing as well with almost the vilification of the real through carbon, right? This vilification of carbon, this almost attempted eradication of carbon. You know, we have to reduce carbon, right? Net zero, all of this nonsense. Um, and it's like what you see with the Greek term pharmakeon, and this is sort of coming back to the really pertinent notion that we're bringing up now regarding the egregores and the demons. And I guess the goddess of starvation, if we were to look at the sort of body dysmorphia part of it with the celebrity culture. And you see with pharmakeon that it can mean sorcery, but it can also mean cure and poison, interestingly, simultaneously, which of course has great bearing upon our both the pharmaceutical industry right now, but really to many things in our world, both of course the cosmetic industry and the cosmetic sort of Frankensteinian processing of celebrities, and too as well what we're seeing in the alternative spheres with look maxing culture. You're even seeing guys hit hammers against their jawline to try and redefine their jaw, so their jaw is more lean and more defined, right? More visually appealing, right? In the contemporary sense. So really it's all about making more efficient the economic asset that has, of course, become the face and the body and really the personality, right? Um, and that which sits behind it, the soul, right? So it's the idea that we are biologically inherently inadequate. It's almost like an original sin, in a sense, right? And that we well, really it brings to the fore this question of what dosage becomes lethal, right? Like allopathic medicine, it uses sublethal doses of poison to cure people. At what dosage does this rectification of this supposed biological inadequacy, either through cosmetics or whatever it may be, of course, sustainability, environmentalism, or what have you, at what dosage does that become lethal? So really, the question is, is the real being poisoned because we are trying to replace the carbon of the flesh with, I guess, like a silicon image itself, right? And this is tied in with the linguistics. But you mentioned this deity, Zeal. Anadim is her name, I believe. I didn't look into her yet, but from what I can see, just from a cursory glance right now, I think that ties in with what we're seeing. This archetype probably goes by many names throughout many cultures, but I think it's this is the spirit of our age currently. This this again, like a goddess of starvation, a goddess of masquerading, right? You mentioned that it means in Gaelic soul. You see the same thing with what Ludwig Klages mentions, right? That the soul, pardon me, the Geist, which can be translated as spirit or the inframing of reality, effectively, right? The intellect, the mind. That is the adversary of the soul, and that it seeks to replace the living image with a dead image. And so, how do you see this goddess tie in with that? And is this an egregore that comes out of man? I think Armunn has really already answered this, but what are your opinions upon that? If you can explore it in more depth.
Well, look, I'll have to give you a kind of a magazine answer first before we went to the kind of deeper side of it. But just going on an article that I've read here, this is in relation to anorexia, kind of linked in with cosmetic enhancement. So like, you know, you could argue they're not linked, but I'm kind of putting them in the same pot for now because both of them are in around body image. But so like we're talking about underground groups here that support online groups that support anorexia in this sense, right? So let me just read this out to you. Quote: It was around this time that the pro anorexia community figurehead emerged, Narcissa. Now, Narcissa was a Satanist and a keen student of Freemason adjacent occultism. I don't know why she says adjacent occultism. So he was a Satanist and a keen student of Freemason adjacent occultism. The pseudonyms Narcissa introduced to the forums, Narcissa, who's the leader, introduced a deity she described as, quote, the guardian servitor of the anorectic praxis, who existed to help her adherents in achieving bodily and spiritual transformation through the rejection of food. And the deity, in that sense, was what she named that deity or demon Anamadim. Anamadim. So that's Anamadim. So Anam, the first part of that is in Gaelic. Now, I don't know if this is what the person meant, but Anam does mean soul in Irish Gaelic. I'm not sure about the rest of it. But anyway, look at in and around a deity or an entity, like it's like any addiction. It has its own kind of negative whirlpool of energy around it that affects everybody around the person. So that energy, that summary energy, I call a demon, and the ensuing sort of behaviors that are irrational and compulsive and out of control. You know, the energy in and around all that is you know, I call it a demon. That's the word I use because it's you know, it's a facility, a facile. It's the only word that seems to fit for me anyway. Just as we have it there, part of the narrative in and around Anamadim, according to this person, the goddess's number or the demon's number was 147. So we've discussed this in the past, this 47 number. And each new moon, quote, Narcissa advised her followers to set up an altar facing east, which they could adorn with candles, incense, and anti-offerings of food like cookies and chips. In doing so, Anamadim would appear to them at 1:47 a.m. It's kind of shite, like, you know. So this all depends on what you believe any of this stuff or not. But this is the kind of caper that's been advertised to, I assume, mainly teenage girls or young women who are either deluded or are naive or a mixture or just are mentally deranged or a mixture of all the above. So
Well,
but like, go ahead.
it's like what Armunn stated as well. Because we are now in the internet age, in the digital age, we are so engrossed in the screen. And the screen is constant. It's given us effectively, you know, a non-stop stream of advertisement. And advertisement preys upon these vulnerabilities and weaknesses and the chinks in one's armor. And it's looking for ways to probe and penetrate into the psyche itself and to hollow us out, right? Not just cosmetically speaking, but also both intellectually and spiritually, because like, it's almost like the demon. It needs that hollow void, that lacuna, in which to inhabit, to sit within, you know. So it's yeah, like what you're saying. It's a way this demon idea is similar to God. It's a placeholder concept or rather incomprehensible, pardon, and incorporeal ideas that, you know, orbit around this notion of the sort of built up shadows, untamed shadows, perhaps unidentified shadows, right? That eventually, as Armunn would state, you know, express themselves through mind characters, express themselves almost through parasitic, psychological egregores and expressions and substances, yeah.
And note how it all came to that point, hand in hand with the presentation of the holy, as you know, for example, veganism being a holy way to exist, right? So it is like a stepping stone towards no food at all, and then you already have channels that, whether you believe that they are genuine or not, that's beside the point, but you already have channels in social media promoting no food at all, like they say they live on on the breath alone, and on prana, and on it's I mean, if you take a step back, if you're not really involved in the religion, because it is religious side of it, you see how ridiculous it is, but people are sucked in because they think, they are convinced that they are insufficient, that they are worthless, right? And to be of worth, to be sanctified, right? You are picked up by one of these currents of, religious thought, to basically sacrifice yourself to, destroy the old mask of the world in favor of the new. And this is not, again, to say that the old mask was the absolutely true one, and that's not to say that, but it is a transformation, and these people are the sacrifices for that transformation to occur. So see how everything was moving towards that goal. You have people that do believe, actually do believe, with every inch of their thought. And I have been a vegan, as you know, due to my Buddhist days, so I know from the inside how it is. And there are people that really do think that it is more saint, that it is more um, uh, holy to not consume animal, right? And then, of course, it's just a little step to not consume anything at all, right? You just starve and reach heaven or something. It's If you take a step back, it's ridiculous, but it is due to that starting point of, you are a sinner, you are insufficient, you are worth. And if you can't be this ideal, then at least kill yourself, right? And of course, we also have new ideas appearing about euthanasia, in regards to euthanasia as oh, I don't feel like living anymore, so euthanasia, right? It's not like euthanasia and you are in a terminal disease and whatever. No, we're talking about like, oh, I just don't, today I woke up indisposed, so I'll kill myself, and that kind of thing. So it is all linked into that. You understand the idea of the sinner that is born a sinner and has to be sanctified through a process. But it is not a sanctification, it is a self-sacrifice that people themselves by. No one actually forces them using force, in the how forced really means, to actually pick them up and prevent them from eating or whatever. No, they are led to it by their own volition, by their own rejection of who they are. And this has to be emphasized, and if I have to emphasize it eternally, I will. But I'm just one, and I do what I can, But I think that is the crux of the matter, man.
It's very interesting as well, because you see, obviously, I'm not necessarily a proponent, but I like reading Oswald Spengler's works, and I'm quite, I guess you could say, inspired by them on a certain level. But he stated this. He said, quote, "The last man of the world city no longer wants to live. It is a characteristic of this collective existence that it eliminates the terror of death." And in that, he's almost stating that the elimination of the terror of death is exactly what man craves. Once, of course, he sups from the font of poison that is this sort of civilizational drama, from its origin point, its inevitable terminus, and then its inevitable renewal, right? Like any addiction. But you see in Revelation 9, both 7 through, pardon me, from Revelation 9 verses 6 to 8, it states that in those days men will seek well, let's go from verse 5 actually. "The locusts were not given power to kill them, but only to torment them for 5 months, and their torment was like the stinging of a scorpion. In those days men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will escape them. And the locusts, like horses for battle, with something like crowns of gold on their heads, and their faces were like faces of men. They had hair like that of women and teeth like those of lions." So in this sort of chimera, what you're actually seeing the aberration of form, funnily enough. You see this in a lot of other mythologies too, these sort of monstrous entities, that they are almost exhibiting this uncanny valley effect, right? They may be somewhat humanoid, but they're not necessarily totally. There's something off about them. There's some eerie element of them that throws one off, right? And it's interesting because human beings actually, on as a whole, about, I believe, range around 95%, say that human beings actually have this fear of the uncanny valley effect. So it's this idea that, if something looks human but not quite naturally human, right? And there, people pick up on that subtle hint that there is this uncanny valley effect, which itself is almost like a fear. It comes from a survival instinct, which is interesting. I mean, where that came from, who knows? But Spengler, as we just stated in that quote, he notes that the last man of the world city clings to life as an individual, but is dead as a type. So if we look at that idea that Zeal is mentioning, that anorexia is almost like a religion, right? We see it with veganism. We see it with, God, like what you were saying, Armunn, breatharians or vegetarians are another one, right? Is the desire to reach an emaciated skeletal state, right? Either through cosmetics or dietary or whatever it may be. Is it a way for the economic animal to finally eliminate the terror of death by almost becoming a corpse while still breathing? And we see the same thing with digitalism. They want immortality without life as well, right? We see that with the Internet of All Things and these AI technologies, and really the kernel that informs their development. So what do you think about that? Is this almost drive for cosmetic surgery, plastic surgery, even veganism, and these strange, quixotic dietary limitations that lead to anorexia, emaciation, or even to the other extreme, lead to complete and utter obesity? Is that a way to eliminate the terror of death by becoming either a corpse, an emaciated corpse, or of course a corpse through destroying one's health through the other end of that, through obesity or what have you? What are your opinions upon that?
Well, if you kill yourself daily, then you stop fearing it, right? It becomes a habit. So yes, it is. The fear of death, but also especially it is the fear of exclusion from life, right? And of course, the life that is perceived is completely artificial. It is actually not life, but it is the life that they have convinced themselves. Each individual has convinced themselves that it is the actual thing. when people see, and I mean, I don't want to focus only on one, but it's since we've talked about that particular celebrity in previous conversations, when people see Taylor Swift, they see the life that they consider to be the pure life, right? They consider that this individual actually rose, to stardom and accomplishment and all that organically, and it's the talent, and it's as the person is, and it represents a role model of what life should be. And of course, when you look at the rest of the pantheon, it's the same thing. The celebrity pantheon in every field, it's the same thing. And so people replace the organic world that they were born in, because it's still here, it didn't leave, it's right here, and with this artificial idea of what life is, and they then put it in a holy state, right? Like as if that artificial life is holy, disregarding that, if anything is holy, is the organic life you were imbued with, right? Is there anything more holy than that? Is there anything more holy than actually living? The best prayer you can do is to live, right? To live unapologetically, unless you need to apologize. There is a moment to apologize, but when I say unapologetically, is without having to convince others that you have the right to live as you, that you have the right to organically exist, right? And this is what people have convinced themselves to steal from themselves. Nobody forced them, and this is again the key point that will give back the individual his own responsibility. No one forced them. No one forced me to think that I should become a Buddhist monk, right? And then, of course, it was synchronistically synchronistic events that I myself also created that prevented me from actually following through with it. But nobody convinced me. I was the one that convinced myself that that was holy, right? And so I followed it. I went, and then myself, my own self, came back to me and prevented me synchronistically from going there, prevented me. So it basically shielded me. And not everyone is, that fortunate to have. I have some conjugation of factors within my psyche that allowed me to have that shielding, and other people don't. I don't know how it works in exact, in detail, but the key point here to understand is that people can only get their responsibility back if they understand that they bought into it, whatever it was, that they bought into it. And once they understand this, then they can start living. And even, yes, if they did surgery, or if they did, yes, there are consequences to their previous choices. But that doesn't mean that life ends. They're still here. And there's still something organic in them, right? And the only way to get it back is to, first of all, accept, okay, I bought into this. No one forced me. It was me. I looked in the mirror and I decided, with all the circumstances that surrounded my life at the time, I decided that I was unworthy, and this image that I wanted to see was the holy image. Right? And we see the same thing in religion, with all the godly saints, man, sons of God, whatever, in all religions, that when they are made literal, they become these unattainable role models. And they are unattainable because they are not organic. They are not literal, right? At most, they are symbols for something that could help us, right? Like a story. If I tell you a fable that has some sort of message imbued into the parable or into the metaphor that it uses, you can use that. You can extract the meaning of that to your individual life, and that is you that do it as well. But if you treat that fable as literal, I mean, you can never be Little Red Riding Hood or whatever, right? You can never be. You can never be the big bad wolf or whatever. Not literally, right? But you can see yourself. You can, read one of these fables and say, well, at that time in my life, I was actually behaving like a bit like the big bad wolf, right? And then you take in that responsibility and you say, well, I don't think that I am organically the big bad wolf, right? So by accepting that, you can then begin to discover the organic life that is continuously here, but that you've left behind in your own psyche, right? So it is a cult of death, like you were trying to, I think, convey. But it is a cult of death that it is not uh, real in the sense that it only lives in the perception of those that embark upon it. It is an egregore for sure, but it is an egregore that you can jump out without it chasing you. Other people can chase you, other cult members can chase you, but the egregore, once you leave it, it leaves you alone. Because that is the thing that people must understand. In your own psyche, you have authority. You are sovereign. Other people can, try to pressure or do this or do that or, whatever. But in your own psyche, that is your temple. That is your, if you want to call a metaphor of holies, right? That is where it is. You have God there, if you like. If you want to put it like that, I'm talking metaphorically, right? God lives in the holiest of holies, which is your psyche. That is where your authority lies. So people have to take back their responsibility, man. Sorry about the rant.
No, I totally agree. Actually, it sort of ties in with something I was reading from a philosopher called Ernest Becker. And before I get into that, do you have any comments you want to make, Zeal? I also, I'm interested in this idea of the exorcism lore as well surrounding this. And you were mentioning that there, Armunn, that absolutely, yeah. And I think, regarding what you were saying with this notion of the organic, and it's almost like we're trying to bury the organic. There's a terror of the organic, if you will. And I think that's something you see throughout probably all of these various arcs and narratives. And I think as well, that's probably what produces the uncanny valley effect. I mean, as well, it's most poignant with, for example, an actor or an actress who has buccal fat removal, which is the fat on the cheek, all moved, so to give them the sort of gaunt look, like very emaciated, corpse-like, hollowed out. But then, of course, you have the lip filler and all of these other various surgeries that establish really a mask. So you have this weird, almost irreconcilable juxtaposition between, like what you're saying, Armunn, the organic nature or psyche that is in there, but it's being conveyed through this thing which, firstly, I mean, it actually destroys, I mean, I don't know why actors and actresses do this, because it destroys the ability, all the Botox and the fillers, it actually ruins the ability to have micro expressions, which is fundamentally the actor or actress's craft. It's the ability to convey emotion without, having to convey the words of the line, right? So if you get rid of that, if you just have these frozen foreheads, and there was a scene with Lindsay Lohan that we were watching this movie. I forget what it was now. It was some. It wasn't even a rom-com. I can't remember what it was. Totally forgettable. But I was watching it with my fiance, and watching Lindsay Lohan trying to cry. It was like watching someone trying to push out a fart, right? It was it was so it really was quite insufferable. So, and you have secondhand embarrassment, and it's very cringeworthy, and there's something very uncanny about the whole thing, right? And it's unhuman and inorganic as well. And it actually makes you see, to be perfectly honest with you, I think it was a comedy of sorts, but it really was a tragedy watching it, because you see someone who is just so lost in the sort of economy of the absolute striation and scarification of her own soul for what, right? For trinkets, for validation, for status. And it gets to this, like what you were saying, Armunn, with the, people, I think they give up the organic because they seek the status of perfection or order, where there is none. I mean, I think I've said it before that perfection is an imperfect state, right? And to be
Of course.
completely perfect, or to appear to yourself as completely perfect through, cosmetic surgery, whatever it may be, even moral cleansing through veganism or breatharianism or whatever it may be, or even the other side of that, carnivore, the sort of carnivore diet and all of that.
Sure.
It fundamentally, it turns you into something that appears imperfect, right? That you're almost trying too hard, like that sort of sense.
But it becomes predictable, because if it's
Exactly.
within the mold, because the idea there, you were talking about that in a way, is the removal of the unpredictability of life. When you were saying perfection, what is perfection in the sense that is seen, in the sense that is perceived? Perfection is the removal of any unpredictability. For something to be perfect, it behaves completely within that mold, right? Within that expected mold. That's why, for example, there's this expectation that an Indian guru will speak always with a voice like this, like Osho used to speak, right? There's always this expectation. They're not supposed to show any emotion because supposedly they've attained this holy state of enlightenment or whatever, right? And that to me is living death. That is not organic. Life implies that you also have emotions. It's not just emotions, but it includes emotions, right? And so that you were talking about, this idea of attaining perfection, it is exactly because they see themselves initially as sinners, as imperfect, the lowest of the lowest, right? And so they have to work towards trying to approach as much as they can that perfection, which is just removing the unpredictability out of their psyche. So putting themselves into a mold to fit that exact ideal that they imagined. But let's bring Zeal back into the conversation. Sorry about taking over this a bit.
No, absolutely not, man. Do you have any comments upon that, Zeal? And I guess the idea is, why would the devil or a demon, why would it seek to destroy the unpredictability? I think you've answered this, Zeal, with the freezing of time, but do you have anything else to mention upon that? And as well, I mean, just to also clarify this question, when I'm in university, I also feel this uncanny valley thing. I feel like almost everyone's like possessed with whether it be Instagram or social media, or they're possessed by the sustainability cult, right? Which is effectively every single lesson is about sustainability. It could be on anything, but it has to bring in sustainability. Do you think society is possessed as a collective, and why?
That's good. It's a good question. I guess it is. I guess it is in a sense, and perhaps we are as well, if you know what I mean, like to a point. And maybe we're wrestling with our the progress of our demon, and the world we see around us increasingly. You're using that term there, uncanny valley. I'm not familiar with that, but from what you're saying, like it's got the literally uncanny kind of, I don't know, disassociated, almost schizoid kind of feel to it, like Um, I guess it is, it's the zeitgeist. It is the spirit of the age we're in, is a kind of schizoid disassociation, and kind of basically a kind of psychosis that's being, being accepted by the group, by the social group, as being new norm, literally a new normal. And like, we were talking about earlier on in the call, started about this Trump speech, this wandering, meandering narrative. It's this kind of oblique, bumbling, or incoherent, at times hubristic, and just meandering narrative coming out of the leader of the most powerful country in the world. And you're kind of going, how can this be? Like, how can this be? Like, and as Armunn said earlier on the call, like, politics. Okay, we never necessarily trusted the political mechanisms and the politicians as such, but at least they had the veneer of professionalism, and at least you had some sort of you could place some sort of value that they're trying to do. The narrative was more believable, whereas now you've got this kind of clown world kind of thing going on, and day by day it just is disintegrating in front of our eyes. The narrative is increasingly jumbled, and it's increasingly, it looks like something that's been better by somebody on magic mushrooms, or some kid with, somebody with maybe, God forbid, like a serious brain injury or something. It's like, it's somebody on the spectrum. Maybe it's not adding up. Like it has the veneer of 1+1 = 2, but it's not. As soon as you dig below it, it's all over the place. And the possession. I'll always remember this interviewer. She was actually a Jewish lady, and I don't know what spectrum it was in, but she was talking about spirituality essentially. And she said that the words in English, demon and dominion, are very closely kind of related in the, etymologically related. But she said, if you're not careful of your dominion or your domain or the borders that are around yourself, if you're not careful to uphold it, then you invite in the demon, as it were. And that's sort of what we've done, is being done by the sorcerers. They've broken down the natural domains of rationality and of sanity itself. And that's something that that I think needs to be at the center of this line of thinking, this topic that we're discussing, is sanity. What is sanity? Because, like, if you have if your reproductive organ vis-a-vis your gender is sort of fluid, and could be this and could be that, or it could be a mixture of anything in between, you've broken down a very central part of human understanding of who a person is and what they are and how they, and by default then the society around them starts to sort of disintegrate slowly. And that's where the demon is. Then the demon, this new energy, takes the place of what's been broken.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think chaos, the demon is chaos, like, but the demon is deception. But deception really is only the key that unlocks the door of chaos. And part of, even body image, things like body image, it's deception, it's self-deception. Like, it's a lie, because everything is based on a lie upon a lie upon a lie. Because the person gets the surgery because they think they'll fit in better. It may help their film career, and that's a deception, because the world they're in is deceiving. It's a world populated by demons. And I was thinking about this. I've been watching a lot of this kind of true crime documentary lately for some reason. It's a very macabre kind of thing to be watching. I watch documentaries on these murders and stuff, and I've got to stop myself doing it because it's quite dark and a little bit depressing. But at the moment, it's sort of fascinating at the same time. But I noticed this kind of strange trait in a lot of cases that I've been watching, like, as hideous and as obscene and upsetting and evil that a lot of these cases are, right? This, when you go back down beneath these initial layers of shock and horror, right? There's a kind of a layer beneath there that's mischief. I call it mischief, and it's almost like childlike. It's Loki. It's a demon that's not necessarily presented as an arch evil. It's a demon that's more playful and presents in an almost kind of childlike way. I don't mean child in the sense of the human child. I mean childlike in kind of
Mhm.
sort of.
Like a trickster.
Yeah, exactly, a trickster.
Mhm.
And but it's almost like it has a kind of an innocence to it. And this is another thing about the demon being a whisperer, and I think that's something that comes from Christianity. This concept, the demon as a whisperer, or the demon as a trickster, as you say, or something kind of playful. That there's the initial sort of flirtation, if you will, with evil is at the start. It's almost fun-like. It has a kind of a fun, a strange kind of a fun, or a kind of an innocence that leads to evil, if you will. So it's the fool. It's the fool on his journey that hasn't become wise, but is starting to kind of move into an area that deep down, some part of him should resonate that this he's not yet in the territory of it being wrong, but he's certainly in the road. He's certainly in the arena of it, like.
What
So,
was?
go
Sorry,
ahead.
Theo, please.
But it's to just to try and flesh out the, like, for example, there was, just as it came to me there as you were talking, I was looking at, there was a Slayer, a heavy metal band from America, a thrash metal band, but they had a song called Dead Skin Mask. And Slayer, it's typical heavy metal stuff. They'll invoke as much horror and gore as for shock value, really, to kind of sell their albums. So I kind of think they're doing it for commercial reasons, really. But anyway, Dead Skin Mask is the name of a Slayer song, but it's a reference to an American serial killer by the name of Ed Gein, who was like he's back in the 50s. And Ed Gein, and not to get too grotesque about it, but and a lot of his ilk, Ed Gein specifically, removed the skin of the human face from some of his victims and maintained the face that he had removed, literally the flesh. And he put makeup on it and such, and he wore that mask, then that dead skin mask. He wore that, it seems. And to me, as hideous as that sound, like the jump between what Ed Gein did to what, like, someone like Jordan is doing. What's the girl's name? Her Katie
Katie
Price.
Price.
Yeah, something like Katie Price is doing, or any of them, any of these people. Like, what is the
the difference. You know, I mean, okay,
You
you
know,
said, you know, in one sense, it echoes so much that it's really hideous, like, you know, and it's you're talking about a demon in society, is it? Is it? It is absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And the problem we have is to navigate it. Like I was thinking earlier, a couple of days ago, like I feel myself increasingly losing faith in my fellow man, in the people around me, not immediate, but the society around me. And I have to day by day tell myself that I'm no better than anyone, or I'm not above anyone, or you know, it's you know, I'm not in a place to point the finger at anyone. So I have to stop myself from getting to a point where I become so cynical and bitter, or turned against my fellow society, that I actually begin to lose empathy for them. So I have to, you know, these are traits, and this is the demon working in a different way, you know. But this idea of mischief, of a kind of you know, this kind of almost fun-like flirtation with
yeah, there's
childish innocence, almost like that. But it has a dark
yeah,
twist in it.
it's almost like it's like the clown itself. It's very jovial, the smiling man. Yeah, I know what you're.
Like we rescued this kitten here, you know, this male cat, Tom, and he's playful, and you know, he's very affectionate. But once in a while, he'll stick his nails right into you because he hasn't kind of joined the dots, or maybe he has, you know. Maybe he understands it hurts you, but every once in a while he'll do this, and it's kind of like the line, the difference for him between what is affection and what is inflicts pain is very blurry, you know. And it's similar to this thing I'm talking about. This mischief is in there, like, and it's, you know, I think we have to be very careful about the roads we go down. Really, I'm speaking to myself as much as anyone else. When we, you know, when we discover the things that we're finding out about the world around us, and who we are vis-a-vis that world, you know, that we in turn don't become the psychopath, as it were. And I'm not necessarily saying we're going to go out and do anything horrendous to anyone, but you know, we may become the sociopath, or if you will, because we would lose empathy between ourselves and our fellow men, because we see this demon has infected our society as such, and the traits become abhorrent to us. And you know, we must struggle to start to remain balanced in the middle of all this, like, you know. Also, with regard to our own inner self, our relationship with our inner self, that we somehow cultivate strength and balance, and perhaps the capacity to tune out from all these things, or however way we might do it, you know.
I think that is an absolutely very profound point you've brought up, because thinking back on the documentaries that I've watched on serial killers and criminology, specifically actually that of Dahmer. Dahmer kept well, of course, body parts, but primarily he kept the skulls of his victims, right? And so, I mean, of course, this links to Bataille, and Bataille was mentioning about the bony protrusions, right? So it's almost like he's the of man, the calcified idols or remnants of life, because that is the thing which will outlast the flesh, which of course is built up and emerges out of the bones, right? Of course, Bataille linked this to society as well, right? But what you're there, even with the gaunt look, the emaciated look, which is, you know, it's the epitome now of beauty, wherein other in the earlier eras of culture and Western society, primarily, you know, for females at least, it was more of a, you know, a plump or chubby look, right? Not chubby as in fat, but you know, to have some sort of fat on them, right? It was a healthy look. It was a look of beauty. Of course, has also links with biology, right? Females that have an hourglass shape, that have a bit of fat around them, of course, look more attractive because they look more fertile, right? Or this is at least the theory. But it's interesting now where you move towards this sort of death drive state where we're seeking to wrestle with our own biology and to even extricate that from our own self, right? To transcend that. What's interesting too is that Dahmer had that same idea, and like what you're saying, Zeal, there really isn't much difference, really. It's the same idea that they're trying to wrestle with time. And this will get into Ernest Becker and his points, but you mentioned about the sort of trickster and this clown and the jovialness of it. But funnily enough, if you look at the Epstein case, right? Epstein and his, I forget which property it was now. I think it was his property in New York. And he had this interesting smiling face, this sort of demented smiling face. I've posted it in the voice chat notes. Painting. And I believe the rumor is, I haven't verified this, but the rumor is that that painting was a depiction of Lex Wesner, who is, of course, tied in with Jeffrey Epstein. Effectively, Jeffrey Epstein was Lex Wesner's mask, right, for all of his clandestine blackmail operations, and also effectively his agent in the political sphere. But in a 1985 article, Lex Wesner mentions that he actually has a Dybbuk, which is the Jewish demon. So that smiling face, supposedly it's rumoured that that is the visage of Lex Wesner's Dybbuk, right? This sort of strange, predatory smile, right? It's almost like this devouring smile. You see the same thing with clowns as well. Stephen King actually uses this quite a lot, right? This jovial trickster. A sort of a Mephistophelian, a trickster deity, right? And anyway, in this 1985 article, it mentions that, quote, Lex Wesner, he met his Dybbuk again when he climbed a Vail Mountain in Colorado, and it changed his life. And now perhaps it is time to reintroduce Leslie Wexner's Dybbuk, the demon that always wakes up in the morning with Wexner and tweaks and pulls at him. When he was a boy, his father called it tummel, churning, so he feels molten and unformed, pricked by these spiritual pins and needles. He met his demon again when he climbed the mountain in front of his house in Vail. Interesting name, right? The Vail. And almost froze to death, and decided to change his life. This demon he calls terminal Schipilkes, which makes him wander from house to house, repeating the pattern of his childhood on a luxurious scale, wanting more, swallowing companies larger than his own. It is precisely the reason that Wexner has 1 billion and didn't stop at, say, 5 million and a new Mercedes every other year and what he calls normal life. So you see the same idea, that he's attempting to relive his childhood again and again and again and again on a luxurious scale, right? It's the same idea as Dahmer. It's the same idea as the sort of cosmetic junkies of the celebrity Hollyweird sphere, right? They're frozen in time. And people mistake that as sort of the realization of ambition and even fluidity, right? As you were out saying, Armunn, it's not fluidity, it's not individuality. It's in fact a standardization, a frozen in time a destruction, literally the bones, the bony protrusions of time, the calcification, the petrification of one's own being, right? To try and rein in their biology. And I want to get your opinions upon this. This is what Ernest Becker mentioned, right? Quote, the body is the truth teller that ruins the fantasy of our infinite nature. We strive to become objects because objects possess a durability and perfection that subjects do not. The irresistible death drive is a desire to cease being biological. The individual becomes both the master and the slave. Oh, sorry, that is Byung-Chul Han. We'll get to that later. But just to mention this, actually, this ties in. Byung-Chul Han mentions that, quote, the individual becomes both the master and the slave. The body is hated because it is the slowest component of our existence, right? But Ernest Becker argued that we are trapped in a terrifying dualism. We have the minds of gods, but the bodies of worms. If our culture has lost its religious shield against death, is this sort of Luxmaxen trend simply a panic response to this paradox? Are we carving, in fact, is this something that's just on repeat? Are we carving and hardening our faces to silence this worm of the biological, the decaying reality of our own mortality, so that the God in our minds can pretend it is immortal? And I've mentioned this before to you, Armunn, that it's almost like what runs this world are not gods. It's not the divine. It is men who, through their trauma, are pretending to be them, you know? So what are your opinions upon that, gentlemen, and working with by Flight of Eros as well?
Yeah, it is man that did that, but it is also the other side of man that made them into existence, that empowered them to do that, right? And you say in that quote that man is stuck in a duality, and it is true. It is stuck in a duality of perception, in the sense that there's this kind of perfection state that is completely conceptual and artificial. I mean, it has no bearing into the organic existence that you can actually verify, that you can actually experience yourself. And there's the state that you're in, and of course, if you perceive that perception as that perfection as perfect, of course you will always be stuck in that duality. You will always be trying to evade, as you say, time and biology and all that it entails, all that organic life entails. But when you come out of that duality, or the binary, as I prefer to say, because it is a story, and every story relies upon a binary, a conflict of binaries. Once you come out of that and you actually, whatever you want to call it, your perception, if you like, if it turns into the actual organic that is there, what you can actually experience firsthand without any story imposed upon it, not even a story that you make up, because not all stories are given. We make up our own stories as well. Once we start doing that, then we are holy, in that sense, because then we are the perfection in outside of that artificiality. We are the perfection that we were born to be, right? And of course, that implies accepting that we are not that other ideal or set of ideals that we were indoctrinated into, right? And these ideals, I mean, I've, as you know, written a book where I mention Jesus a lot and mention Buddha and so on and so forth, but I mention them as mere archetypes, mere metaphorical placeholders for something, for movements that exist within our psyche, right? Never as a literal representation of anything that should be followed, right? And this is what man must come out of. Zeal was very well expressing that it's idolatry. Absolutely, it's idolatry, right? And you have to turn away from these idols of, formatted existence of what you should be, what is acceptable, what is worthy, right? Because I mean, if you look around, nothing exists without function. Nothing exists without a proper place, right? But we have come out of that proper place. And I'm not talking about the cities or the civilizations. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in here, in the mind, inside our temples. We have come out of that, right? And we try to put up a performance of, a scripted life instead of actually living. The performance, it's like the actor has
Oh, we've lost you, Armunn.
I think we lost Silas, or is it?
Oh no, you're back. We lost you at the actor has.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it was my internet. So the actor has played the character so long that he now believes that he is that he is the character, and he forgot that he was an actor, right? So there was this myth. Of course, it's one of these celebrities things. But when I was growing up, there was this very popular series called Alf that ran for almost 10 years or something like that. It had a lot of seasons. And the actors in it, I think, were mostly the same all across the entirety of the series while it lasted. And a particular actor that played the father of the family is said to, and this, of course, is celebrity myths, but is said to have had psychological problems because he played the same character for 10 years. And he would start, according to the myth, he would start being the character in his private life, right? Being that character in the series in his private life. Of course, this is a celebrity myth, but in the same way, transposing that into, let's say, humanity at an individual level, that is exactly happening to us in general, right? It is that we perform a sort of character that is a placeholder for a formatted, acceptable life of an ideal, right? And we forgot that who we were in the first place. It's crazy to think and consider this. It is crazy to think that man is the only being here, whatever this is, Earth, real, whatever you want to call it, is the only being here that as soon as he is born does not know exactly and behave exactly according to its own nature, right? It is born unfinished, and the rest of the gestation happens outside of the womb, right? Those first years of life are a gestation. The person was born yet, per se. You understand? The man, the woman wasn't yet, in my opinion. You understand? It wasn't formed. And it is formed outside. And that is exactly when this performance begins. Because the baby begins performing for his mother, for his father, for his brother, for whoever is around. That's where the performance begins. Oh, they didn't like this, they liked that. And
It's
in that formation, right, in that formative years, very initial, a lot is imbued into, right? And the lot of this artificiality that I'm talking about is imbued into, but that is not irreversible. And this is keep saying it is not irreversible. Yeah, sorry.
Do you know what's very interesting? That's a superb observation, by the way, because I actually tested this out. This theory that I forget where I heard it now. Obviously, my brother, he has a family now, and though his I would say up to maybe 2 or 3. My nephew is 3. Well, near as damn it 4 years old now. God, time flies. But when he was 2, I think he was either 2 or 3. I was talking to my brother about this, and exactly what you stated, where it's almost like people they act as a counterfeit almost, right? They turn themselves into a counterfeit, and reflect their environment. And I said to him, "Watch this." So we all started laughing, right? I instructed my brother, right, start laughing. So we all started laughing, and his son, my nephew, looks at us, obviously confused. He doesn't know what we're laughing at, but because everyone's laughing, he starts laughing, and he starts almost laughing uncontrollably. Then we stop, and he's still laughing. And it takes a minute for him to figure out, oh, right, they're not laughing anymore. So it's like what you're saying, and in that sense, it's a survival instinct. And so people develop to almost become a counterfeit of their natural self.
Yes, it's a performance. It's a performance that starts very, very early. And well, if things go well, which it's unfortunately a very minute percentage of the population. If things go well, there comes a point when when the individual realizes that it is a performance, right? And that is of opportunity. And I am certain that among the people that are listening to this conversation, and perhaps listen to previous conversations that you post, and that I post as well, have that window of opportunity too. If they have listened so far, and if they are, relating in some way to what is being talked here, then that realization has already, you understand, and this is this is actually the holy thing, right? This internal realization, this understanding of what is artificial, the distinction, the discernment, even if you want to use that word, the discrimination between what is artificial and what is, organic, which is something that only at a very individual level you can do. Because if you ask outside, hey, please tell me what is organic, you're falling into the same thing, right? You're living someone else's story. You're living someone else's beliefs or, observations. And then it's conveyed in words, which is incomplete in conveying whatever that is. I mean, I could describe what I view, but you will never see what I see. Right? You can listen to the words and you can conceptualize them in your own mind, but you will never be able to, the word tree does not convey to you the actual tree I'm looking at, right? So at that very individual sense, that is what the holy experience is. It is this discernment between the performance and the organic, and that organic includes the body, against the all the currents of religious thought and some philosophical thought as well. The body is an integral part of the holy life, let's call it like that. And I say holy loosely, right? Holy as a, it is, I use that term on purpose to cause and effect. But what I mean to say is, what people would consider holy in this paradigm, that is the holy. That is the holy. It is when you actually understand and discern what you are not and have been not, right? And if you are able to remove enough, what is left is you. And people are afraid of that void. They are afraid of removing those clothes of artificiality because they think there's nothing behind those clothes, right? In fact, people all think that they are narcissists because the only psyche that does not have anything behind the clothes of artificiality is a narcissist. That is why he only can live the clothes, right? He can only live through the validation of the clothes. So that is not true. People pick up artificial traits that are narcissistic in nature, but most people are not narcissistic. I would say it's a very small percentage of the population that is actually full-blown narcissistic. And my rant has already expelled Zeal, so sorry about that.
No, but no, absolutely. I think you're right. A lot of people they are simply following what they see on social media. So it's similar, of course, to the infant, right? They're not. I don't think they're cognizant of the fact that they may be expressing narcissist traits, but it's like what you're saying. They're not necessarily narcissists, right? They are merely reflecting the environment that they see around them and they observe as a means of almost economically signaling both their social viability within that social organism, that environment, and of course also their economic potentiality, their economic value in that environment too. So it's absolutely, yeah.
Listen, Silas, when
Yeah.
sorry, just to complete what we're there, when you have to hand over a paper to your university, right? You can't actually
Oh, yeah.
present what you want to say. You are expected to perform according to the defined mold, right? Of course, you are aware of it, so you do it consciously of what you're doing and with a specific purpose. But if you weren't conscious of it, if you actually identified and thought, yeah, this is what I think, this is what I believe, because this is what gives me validation, then of course you will continue to perform, right? And you will
Well,
perform with yeah.
here's an example of that. I don't know if you saw it, but I actually lost marks on. Absolutely, it's a performance, and funnily enough, I lost marks on. God, I actually can't even. It was last semester. I can't even recall the classes that we took. They're all corporate gobbledygook, essentially.
Mm.
But they're meaningless, bar a few. But anyway, I was writing a report, and I think I mentioned in it something about yeah. There's an undeniable fatigue in the gospel of sustainability, right? I wasn't meant to say gospel, right? I was actually meant to say maybe messaging or something like that, right? That was the concept I was trying to intimate and imply. And anyway, just totally reflexive, like what you're saying, right? I'm conscious when I'm writing not to put down what but that was almost like a reflexive thing. And I said gospel of sustainability. I actually lost marks on that because, like what you're saying, I wasn't performing correct. There's a certain mold,
Yes.
and I was outside
Yes.
of the mold. You know.
Yes, but now transport that. Okay, that is a very formal setting, the university, but transport that to informal setting. Your relationship to your family, right? To the group that you would call friends, right? Which are not necessarily that, right? A friend is something much deeper than what most people experience, and so on and so forth, right? in those informal settings, that is also at play, right? You say something wrong in a group and people look at you wrong, right? They look at you in a different way. They silence, or they, there's that awkwardness or something like that, right? So that is part of exactly that inducive performance. Oh, I said something wrong. Maybe I am wrong and I should change this in myself. So you adapt the character to fit the script. Right? So absolutely, man. It's a pity we lost Zeal, man. You have to apologize to him for me.
No, I think he was quite tired anyway. Zeal's he's yeah. I think it's his beddy bows, as we say in Scotland. But
Right.
yeah, it's there's on that. It's almost like in the materialistic culture that we're in, the cosmetic surgery itself is almost like you're changing the costume that you as the actor, the performer, are wearing, right? And it's like what you're saying. Everyone knows it's uncanny. It's not quite right. It's inorganic. It's inhuman. It's inauthentic. Yet there's almost a certain upper crust of society. There's almost a veneration of the inauthenticity. There's a veneration of being unnatural, or to even be aberrant or antagonistic to the natural. So I think it was, here we go. Oswald Spengler that wrote that, quote, civilization is the inevitable destiny of the culture, a cold intellectual state that follows the living organic growth, unquote. And then George Bataille almost echoed that, but added to it, quote, the victim dies and the spectators share in what his death reveals. It reveals the shimmering of a world that is no longer limited by the requirements of the individual's survival. And it's almost akin to what we see in the modern day. It's almost like to steal a Bataille term, it's like a potlatch of the self, that we are immolating the self upon the brazier of Moloch. And by destroying the biological survival, or the biological self rather, we're to dim and to sequester, to bury that shimmering and bright light that is our spirit and our soul. We almost tether ourselves circuitously to the void of the void of the hyper object of the culture, right? And moreover as well, it's we almost become more legible to the system. We become more, it's like what you're saying, the performance itself is legibility. Actors themselves have these micro expressions. The cosmetic industry terraforms individuals, and you have things like mewing or Botox or lip filler or buccal removal, buccal fat removal, right? All of this is a micro terraforming. It's a micro expression. Some are larger expressions, broader expressions. To turn one into a large scale, legible, completely smooth, almost like walking braille for the system itself and the machine. That we become part of the machine because we're understood now by the machine. It loses predictability. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember that episode that I did with Sayo on his sensei about Sherlock Holmes, right? And
I didn't watch that one.
You should. It's interesting because I was comparing their Sherlock Holmes to AI, in the sense that Sherlock Holmes was.
I did, yes. That was a good, yes. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Sorry,
because,
that was a good one.
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes was like the in a sense, the introduction to AI. Because it required, for him to deduce, it required that the agents of that, that were involved in that, the elements of that deduction, behaved according to their professions, their status, their, beliefs, so on and so forth. So he would say, okay, because he's a gardener, I expect to see, like, mud on his shoes or something like that, right? But he could never predict this is how an AI thinks, quote unquote. It's not thinking, but he could never predict if that person on that day went home and changed his shoes, or had shoes in his, usually carried shoes in a bag and changed the shoes after work, that kind of thing, whatever. So it is exactly that. If you fit a catalog of mold, right, you become readable, legible, like you said. You become this kind of artificial intelligence, and I'm not specifically saying that about the computer artificial intelligence, but about the systematic artificial intelligence. There's an artificial intelligence with us for a long time, even before computers. A society has its own kind of artificial intelligence regulating, and it can read us. If you see someone in an office space wearing a suit and tie, you understand what that means. It conveys a meaning onto itself, right? Um, uh, so these kinds of, let's say, formatted details, as you say, and I agree entirely, make you be able to be read, cataloged, and managed, if you want it like that, managed in your perception in a far easier way. And that is what actually marketing is. Marketing is cataloging more than anything. And after after it catalogs, it produces the impulses for that specific um, group that it wants to hit, right? So it's people into groups, subgroups, and then it strikes exactly those subgroups. That is, again, a result of AI even before computers. So that is how AI is. In a way, it's this systematic analysis of predictability. And what spoils AI and what spoils society in these terms, what I call worldview, is the unpredictable. And what is unpredictable? Organic life that all of us have. All of us, if organically living, have some sort of unpredictability about us.
Absolutely, it's the death of chance, and that's what you see in the likes of Sherlock Holmes as well, right? Sherlock Holmes is impressive to us because, well, like what you're saying, anything that occurs within the world, even though it is completely ridiculous, right? Like what you were mentioning in that, from what I can recall from that episode, is that there's certain deductions that just make absolutely no sense whatsoever. But the idea is that, of course, to the uninformed reader, the reader that doesn't, of course, scratch the surface to peer deeper into the contusions of mistakes, what they will find is that it is a veneration of, if you will, the informational engine and its ability to interrogate all things in the world and to explicate all things, right? To bring us pure causal determinism. So all things in the world, all happenings are not now by happen chance because of this thinking machine, if you will, in the case of Sherlock Holmes, or in our modern sense, AI. We have a death of chance. There's no chance anymore, like what you're saying. So all of the unexpected incidents can be deduced, right? Even, of course, if the deductions are completely irrelevant or stupid, it doesn't matter, because if we now have a population, let's say we catalogue or can form a population into catalogues and categories to the point where we pigeonhole them to such a degree, intellectually speaking, spiritually as well, even in this physically, that they become a standardized, almost automaton, unthinking beyond the bounds that has been set. Then, of course, they will look no further at the deductions that the oracular machine of either Sherlock Holmes or, of course, AI will provide them, right? So if you go, I don't know, why are human beings unhappy, right? Now, of course, that's an unanswerable question. Even if we were to spend a lifetime trying to deduce that, even for ourselves specifically, at any given moment, we couldn't really figure out the true causal root of it, right? But if you were to think of that on a larger macro scale with the human being, with the species itself, I mean, how couldn't answer that? But if you have a population who are receptive to the deductions and to the answers of an oracular machine that they would see perhaps as of the purely informational age, the informational world, then of course they're going to be very, very accepting of the answer, right? Well, if the AI comes out, well, happiness, we've deduced it all down and all of the studies we've done and blah, blah, blah. And people are unhappy because of this, right? So this is what you're seeing. You're seeing basically the rationalization of irrationality. The thinking machine that is actually utterly stupid, but because the population do not have the ability to grasp meaning anymore, nor to critically verify it, it all seems completely intelligent. It's rather strange, yeah.
But it's in exchange for predictability, which eliminates, or not eliminates, because it doesn't actually eliminate, but it appeases the tension that originated the whole situation for that particular psyche, right? Because at every point, at one point in every of our lives, in all of our lives, there was this point where this tension emerged, this tension of I have to eliminate this unpredictability that causes this stress with my environment. Of course, this environment, I'm talking about social environment, familial environment, whatever. And being predictable and accepting predictability and even wearing predictability, performance, removes or appeases that tension, because in fact that tension never disappears, and it actually grows as a shadow and is projected out and eventually reflected back. And there can even be, of course, a tower moment like we've discussed in the past. But it appeases somehow. It's like an anesthetic for that tension, right? That is lingering in the background, and it only remains as a tension, not because the individual was wrong to begin with, was a sinner in the religious sense, but because the world had gone mad, and that individual was born in a world that had gone mad, and the tension is the individual trying to adapt.
Yeah, exactly. Adapt to a sick society. It's an interesting philosopher called Gunther Anders, and he mentions of what you're speaking about, this sort of tension, right? It's almost like what you're saying. They're trying to find balance in a totally imbalanced environment, but so to thus to be balanced with an imbalanced environment is to thus be imbalanced. So it's circuitous, but. He mentions the Promethean shame, which is the deep inferiority we feel because we were born messy, right? It's the same idea Ernest Becker was talking about with that, trying to reconcile the infinite with the finite. So we lose ourselves in fantasy and escapism and that bleeds into our own life through addictions. But yeah, so we're trying to reconcile the feeling that we're born messy or unchosen to that which is the made, the calculated, the perfect. So what you're seeing in society, weirdly enough, is you see this with the phone filters as well. People do not take pictures now without filters, right? So you'll never see them. You're seeing a sort of simulacra of them, in a weird way, I guess, a sort of nightmarish reflection, right? A mathematical abstraction that was born of standards of beauty that were set by pure mathematics, right? The perfection of formula. So it's what we see now in the human world is almost like a digital bleed over. It's because we are so inundated with screens and phones and the digital scrying mirrors, there's almost a digital terraforming that's going on silently. It's a quiet war, and the silent weapon is the iPhone. And so human beings now are they're like desperately trying to almost emulate, the what is manufactured from the iPhone, right? They're almost trying to feel equal to their iPhone, right? And so
Yeah.
you're fun to. I mean, it's so
And it's
crazy when you
called, and
think
it's
about
called,
it, but yeah.
and it's called iPhone, right? And the other one is Android. So
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. Oh God, I didn't even
Sorry,
think
go
of
on.
it that way, but it's so, yeah, when you put it like that, yeah. So it's almost drawing you in. It's like what Zeal was mentioning with that Anam, right? And Anamadim, this anorexic deity, this sort of new age cult that's ongoing there. But Anam means soul, so it's trying to bring you in by masquerading as something it's not. It's the trickster, quite frankly. And it's like what you see of digitalism as well, right? And the cosmetic industry. The cosmetic industry, and you rightly identified this, Armunn, where it states, if, and you said it with tattoos too, if you get a tattoo or if you get Botox or cosmetic surgery of any kind, you will look your best, and your best is that which is unique, right? You will look, best implies unique. You will look unique from other people, right? But of course you don't. You that's a masquerade, it's a lie. It's the pure lie in the advertise. It's hidden by the advertisement, which is in fact you'll actually look completely standardized, like all the other botched sort of celebrity faces. Similarly, of course, with tattoos, you will be an individual, but when everyone gets a tattoo, to be unique is to actually not get a tattoo. So you see the same thing with, of course, with the iPhone, right? It's this is you, this is your individual phone. The digitalism, this is to empower you. AI, this is to empower you. And it does not. Short form video content, which of course is primarily consumed on iPhones and Androids, it's destroyed our ability to express ourselves, and it's destroyed our ability to also have long-term memory, to enjoy learning, to have an attention span that is robust enough to enjoy learning. And then of course AI itself has, well, it's really sapped our creativity by supplanting it with a convenience, right? So you
Yes,
get all this.
and our
Really, it is a
intuition
demon
and
in that
our.
sense.
I'm
Absolutely.
sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, absolutely, you're spot on, and our intuition. So in that sense, the masquerade of it is almost like it's like Faust in a way. We've made a bargain, a deathly bargain, with Mephistopheles, and in this Mephistophelian bargain, we've sold our soul for the price of like what you're saying, sort of having this balance, this not balance in and of itself, right? Not balance as in it's a reality of balance, but a semblance of balance, right? You feel like the tension has gone, at least temporarily. Of course, this is the addiction, right? The phone has to constantly be seen. It has to be in the vicinity. It has to be. You have to be given it attention, right? Or the cosmetic surgery. You have to get more cosmetic surgeries to beat back aging, right? Or you can take any addiction really, but so it's really it's a ritual of necrology. We are necrotizing ourselves to thus to thus look beautiful, to thus be the beautiful one, to thus destroy unpredictability. You know, it's quite crazy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It is a surrogate life, a surrogate for life, and that is what the worldview is, in my opinion. I think that the worldview replaces the world, right? And it's called worldview because it's like a perception of it. It's how you see it, not what it is. And so you basically evade, let's say, the life itself that is there to be lived. Whatever it is, each circumstance is a circumstance, each case a case. For this pre-formatted stand-in, right? For it, these pre-formatted, acceptable, predictable stand-in for it, and and listen, I will tell you a very personal example. My mother, she, at 11 years old, was working in a factory. Okay, so she had no childhood basically, and after leaving leaving the factory, after finishing the day in the factory, she would come home and she would have to do housework for her older brothers. Okay, so this was the way more or less the things were. And at the time, she was, of course, naturally unhappy, and she was sold a story. And the deal was, okay, you find a hardworking man, you marry, you have kids, you build, a life that is financially secure, you get a home, you are done. Life is happy. Life is done. Life is good. And after 60 years, it wasn't. You know, it wasn't. But she couldn't really pinpoint, she couldn't really identify why it wasn't. Why? Why is this? It seems like the world is conspiring for me not to be happy. Right? And of course, that oozed down to me as well, as her son. But why? Why is this, conspiracy of the world against me in that sense, right? Why am I not happy? I have bought the story, I have lived the story to the letter, and I'm still not happy. Well, of course, now she's gone. I can't tell her that, and probably even if I did, she wouldn't, unfortunately, understand. But it's because she wasn't her. She was living a performance, right? And she performed. I mean, she never loved my father. I witnessed, I know, I understand. She never truly loved my father. She bought the story of my father. My father was hardworking. This is the man that I was told in the story should be, right? And then the rest, all the details of this performance in life, right? And this is a very concrete example. And she, when she passed away unhappy. And it wasn't because she was a sinner to begin with. It wasn't because she was imperfect. I mean, she was human, but she was living as something else.
Yeah.
You understand? And this is like, the cautionary thing that I think we're trying to, convey. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we're trying to convey this cautionary thing with these conversations. is, seize the performance. I mean, yeah, we have to negotiate with the people around us. And I know, yeah, you're in a madhouse and you have to negotiate the madhouse. I can completely understand and do it myself. But negotiating a madhouse doesn't mean you join it. Doesn't mean that you apply for it, right? So yeah, man, that's, well, sorry, got a bit too
No,
personal
but
there, perhaps, but I think it was a good
it's
example to convey.
That's a great example, actually, because it shows. I was just looking up the etymology of performance there because I'm always, I'm interested with etymologies and their meanings. Comes from the old French word parfournir, which means to accomplish or to complete something, right? Which, of course, I mean, is completely antithetical to life. You can never truly. How can you find it? How can you discover or answer a mystery, right? The mystery is the structure of life itself. How can you, complete the circle without thus, of course, um, uh, well, effectively destroying the cycle? So, it's this. It's like what you're saying, man. It's this problem with performance. It's the problem with status as well. There's a guy called Peter Turchin. He talks about civilization, and the problem with it is elite overproduction. And the issue is with it, and this also is somewhat attributable to the Universe 25 of Calhoun's experiment, which is that the mice went mad and started killing each other and effectively, self-destructed because sure, they had all of the food, they had all of their basic amenities and necessities met, right? That would be required for reproduction, but what started to become less and less achievable was status, right? So, yeah, I mean, it shows really the problem I think we have is performance, it's status. It's this, we're trying to be things that we're necessarily not, you know? We're
And you
trying
will
to
never
fit
be. And you will never
exactly.
be. You can
Yeah.
never get there. That is the whole point. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but
Oh, absolutely.
sometimes, well, I have to. But you know, for the people listening now, right? How many are parents, right? Have children, and how many consider to themselves during their day, am I being a good mother? Am I being a good father? Right? Am I doing the right thing for my child? That kind of thing. Where does that come from? Analyze, contemplate, where does that come from? Right? You look at your child as, with the love that you have for your child. Why do you need to ask if you're doing the right thing? In relation to what? In relation to what ideal? Right? You understand what I'm trying to say? Like, there is an ideal,
Yeah.
that a standard of what a good mother is, a good father is. For example, right? And then you try to emulate that example. It's a religion. It's the same thing as trying to be Jesus or Buddha. In a smaller scale, but it's the same thing. If you strip it down of all the, secular details, it's a religion in its bare bones, right?
Mhm. And
And it's religious thought. Yeah.
this relates as well to the need for the elimination of the terror of death, which is death effectively is the unknown. Death is this. It's basically antithetical to that concept you were speaking of. This it's almost like the Platonic ideal, right, of something, which is that itself is an anathema to life, because life is imbued with so much diversity. There is no actual form or typus or universal ideal of anything, right? Because fundamentally, if you perfect something to a state where it loses all predictability. It loses all unpredictability, rather. Then you don't you don't necessarily create predictability. What you create is actually cold, calculated devoidness, a sort of vacuity, right? Nothing exists there. So, and I mean, it's the problem as well. It's like what you're saying, right? If everyone lives up to this, let's just say in terms of parenting, lives up to this ideal of parenting, right? Of being the good and perfect parent. Firstly, what else suffers in their life to reach that, to climb that fatal slope? And then secondly, if everyone is, a perfect parent, then there will be a new standard of imperfection, because there always has to be, right? But here's another thing too. I think people lose them, especially religion, right? But you also see things. You see it in things like that those ideals, where people are trying to strive to be perfect in something. Fundamentally, they lose themselves along the way. They actually never achieve it.
Of course, and that is the purpose. And that is the purpose of religion, and that is the purpose of the religious thought behind these secular ideals as well. That's why I say that if you strip it down, it is religion. We live immersed in religious thought, even in our quote-unquote secular lives. Right? Even within our families, right? If we are unaware of it, we live religion because of exactly that, right? Because of trying to fit, I want to be a good son, I want to be a good father, I want to be a good worker, I want to be a good citizen, right? But these external standards, while you're trying to be that, you're not being who you are, right? Whatever that is, whatever that is. And it might not be economically useful to the society, to the worldview, because it is an economic setting, as we've discussed. It might not be useful in the economic sense, but it doesn't mean that it isn't organically useful. Economically, I'm probably completely useless, right? Does that mean that I don't have organic value? Otherwise, I'm here perhaps talking with you for, 2 hours or so, right? So, this is the distinction that people have to, the discernment that people have to have, right? About themselves. Yeah.
That actually reminds me of, to share a personal story on behalf of myself. I remember when I was, sort of budding musician in my early adolescent years, and I remember, music was always seen like similar to sports within especially the working class areas of, well, perhaps all over the world, right? But the working class, the idea of the working class, which is fairly, I guess, British and Irish cultural phenomenon. And anyway, for me growing up, interested in music, I was interested in music in a very introverted way. Don't get me wrong, I like performing as well, right, on stage. And but I didn't like performing because of the adoration or accolades I would get from the performance or from the crowd. I liked playing music. I liked the energy, the buzz, the sort of adrenaline rush. So it was always for me deeply personal, right? And I kind of realized that fundamentally, if you're writing music and playing music and performing music, fundamentally for yourself, right? Be it for whatever reason, you actually are probably going to make money. You're not going to become economically or commercially viable, right? Because you can't be bought. Because fundamentally, your love for the thing isn't in the byproduct of the economic measurement of it, right? Through money, of course. So, but growing up, I remember my father. My father would always say, and he still speaks about it to this day. I think there's a sort of sense that he was living vicariously through my brother and I when we were performing, gigging. He would come and almost be our taxi and our roadie and help us along with the stuff. And he also was a musician somewhat in his early adolescent years too. But he never took it any further. He didn't even perform. He barely learned guitar in his adolescent years. And he revisited it later, or maybe when 35, 36, in his midlife. So for him, it was almost like he was trying to reclaim his youth, I think, through us. There was a part of that, right? Perhaps it was subconscious. And this, he did support us in that. I'm not necessarily downgrading that. I'm just looking at this more psychologically. But in the working class, it's almost seen as like a ladder, purely as a ladder. Same with sports, purely as a ladder to get out of, the cycle of deprivation or pauperdom, essentially. And so he still speaks about it today, my father. You and referring to me and my brother, you should have made it somewhere, that you had the talent in that, and you should have, you should have done something. I don't think you promoted yourself enough and marketed yourself enough. And he never quite understood at the time when I was, I still tell him this, I still reply with this when he brings it up. But at the time, I said to him, I actually really don't care about performance anymore. In terms of gigging, I only actually care about writing the songs and effectively interacting with the guitar is almost like an extension of my own soul, right? And writing the songs because I love writing the songs, not because I love writing the songs because I think I'm going to get something at the end of it, right? And this is why I think it's religious thinking, right? All of this is because fundamentally, right, it's like the performance. You perform in a ritual. You perform on stage, in theatre. It's all theatrical. The ritual has a completion. The ritual has an end. The digital has a terminal. The theatre has a a climax and a conclusion and closure. And likewise, of course, the symphony has a coda and eventual terminus. All of these things end. They're all the expressions of finitude. But within the economic delusion that man rents his soul by, fundamentally, man makes himself believe that these measurements and symbols and accoutrements of finitude are in fact the pathway to the infinite, and they're not. The infinite, as far as man can glimpse him, is a fleeting moment. It is a butterfly that's carried by, winds of change that are constant. And that's what I understood when I was, I guess, I remember my father, we would talk about this, and he also wrote a few songs too. And he would always mention, the best songs you never have to think about because they just come to you. We called it the ether, right? They just come to you from the ether. And so, the best things in life you don't have to think about. You don't have to try to make them form. They simply just happen, right? You can call it synchronicity or what have you, but it's that magic that I feel And I think you feel it as well, and I think that all of us feel it in the Discord server. Anyone that we've spoken to, all of the so-called conspiracy theorists, right? Fundamentally, it's not the conspiracy we're theorizing about. It's we realize that there is an authenticity, there is a magic that once electrified the air, that enlivened our very souls, that is no longer there. Or it's there only in sort of partial remnants. And we are, the residue of it is quickly being evaporated by the sort of frozen window pane like society in which we inhabit. And yeah, that's the thing that sort of, funnily enough, it's the sort of epiphany that I had that actually killed all potential economic success that I could have had. Because I wasn't willing.
Understand. Yeah.
I wasn't willing to sell my soul. I didn't want to sell my soul. And even though that I'm in university right now, I am so detached from it mentally, right? Again, like what you're saying, it's a performance simply because, I don't want to be breaking my back on a construction site. So, you grit and bear it. But, when it comes to things that are creative, purely creative, like music and art and things like that, I think it's almost a sacrilege if you simply just do it for money, right? You can make money doing it, you can cover the costs, whatever. But if you do it fundamentally just for socio-economic benefits, you actually kill the thing, Yeah, and I think that's what's going on here. I think that is what's going on here with everything we've been talking about with this topic.
Well, absolutely brilliant, and I would like to applaud you. Absolutely brilliant. Everything you said, I think it was really inspired and to the point. So I'm speechless right now, which is very rare. Yeah, brilliant, man. That's absolutely good.
Very good. Well, if you're speechless, we'll conclude the discussion then.
Yeah, I think we've run long enough. Yeah, but it's a magnificent way to wrap it up. I think you've touched upon everything, and in fact, I relate entirely. As you know, it's one of the reasons why I never wanted to involve any kind of money in what I do in these fields, because it is to me in the same way that the music that you still do is holy to you, and like your father says, the best songs you don't have to think about, and that's why for these conversations I never prepare. And if if the song is lousy on the day, it's lousy. If the song is good, then that it was out of the ether or whatever you want to call it. I completely relate and can only take my hat if I wore one. Take my hat off and appreciate being your friend and meeting a soul such as yours. And I'm really fortunate, you, Zeal, Kazumbo, so many others. It's really a privilege to this is life in that regard. Thank you.
Well, I totally agree. Likewise, I feel in this world there's very few principled and dare I say honourable beings, and this is the good thing about these servers and these locales, such as yourself. We've both found fellowship, and we've understood that we're not the only ones. We're not the nuggets of gold within the hardened quartz of the sort of cold stone, right, of society. So yeah, I'll just end it with this little quote. Well, I'll end it with this little paragraph, and then we'll close out, man. If, as Spengler suggested, we are in the terminal winter of our civilization, then these aesthetic trends are the frost patterns on the window pane. We are not becoming more beautiful, we're becoming more legible to to a machine. The thirst for annihilation is no longer just a metaphor. It is written in the sharp lines of these celebrities' jaws and the hollows of their cheeks. The only question remains when the transformation is complete, will there be anyone left inside to notice? And Nick Land mentioned, quote, "The desire for the inhuman is the desire for an exit from the labyrinth of human history, a very thirst for annihilation itself." So with that, man, I have to thank you again for joining us, and for Zeal. He's probably in the land of Nod as we currently speak. Murmuring Z's and snoring. Yeah. But yeah, I thank you very much for your time, and I have to be honest, it's quite cathartic. You know, I've been pretty deep into the uni work right now. Yeah, due to the laziness on the parts of my my group, so you know, it's quite cathartic and to speak to you guys. At least I'm speaking to actual organic human beings, you know. And we don't
I'm not a
have
bot.
to mention
I'm not a bot.
oh, honestly, it's like speaking to an AI chatbot when they bring up sustainability. It's like the same. So, oh my god, yeah. If my eyes could roll out of my skull, they
Yeah.
certainly would.
Yeah, much appreciated as well, and appreciation also for Zeal. It's a pity that he couldn't stay to the end. And thank you again, and well, keep them coming. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely, man. Have a good one.
See ya. Thank you.